Another video, another forgotten coffee. Hold please. Whew. Okay, much better. First you drink the coffee, then you do the things. So let's drink our coffee. And now do the thing. Okay. Check and check. Hey guys, we are back with another one, and I am finally finding time to sit down and film this video for you, even though it has been the most requested, like probably the most comments requesting that I do this video on this channel in quite a while. And ironically enough, I feel like for most creators, sit down videos, quote unquote, where I just sit and film, are the easiest to film, because what you don't kind of see behind the scenes on YouTube and BookTube, you might get one 40-minute video, but that's like a week's worth of reading for me. Sit-down videos are typically easier because you just sit and you film and you edit and you upload. However, I don't ever find time to just sit down. And when I do just sit down, I'm reading for a challenge. So finding the time to sit in one space and film is difficult for me. I am an on-the-run reader. I have my Kindle or my book in the car. I'm reading between appointments, between kids' activities. I'm grabbing 30 minutes on the couch when I can, but I'm not really a sit-down person. I rarely sit down, which makes filming sit-down videos quite difficult. So it was a little bit difficult to find the time, and I guess that's my roundabout long way of apologizing that I'm just getting to it. But the good news is, because I have put this off for so long, you are going to get a very long wrap-up video. So quality over quantity, you know what I'm saying? With that being said, it has been so long since I filmed a wrap-up that I had to actually look back into the videos on the channel, and I realized that the last wrap-up video I did was April through June, I believe. So today we are doing July through November, which is crazy. So with that being said, there are going to be obviously a lot of books that I've read from July to November in those couple of months that I read. So I'm not going to dive too far into the descriptions of the books. I'm going to give you kind of a surface level of my thoughts. But the good news is every single one of these books that I discuss is discussed in a separate video. So if you go back to the April through June wrap up and move forward after that, those are all going to be the videos that I read the books that I'm about to kind of briefly touch upon in. So if you want extra thoughts, or you want first impressions when I was reading, or you want me to go deeper, go and kind of dig into those, or comment below and tell me what book you're interested in, and I can send you a link to the video where I really dive deep into it. I hope that makes sense. But if we tried to dive deep into all of these books, this would be the longest video on my channel, which, if you know me, is saying quite a bit because my channel has very long videos on it. So let's jump right into what I read in July. Okay, so July was a great month of reading. According to my stats, I have that I read 8 books. The stats that I have are that I read 3 fantasy, 1 fantasy literary fiction, 1 literary fiction, and 3 romances. And here is the stack. That is a pretty looking stack, so let's talk about them. The first book I read was The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. This is the book that I would consider like the literary fiction crossed with a little bit of fantasy. I've talked about this book in several of my videos, but it is basically about a girl who is invited to a competition on Clock Island that is owned by this reclusive author, and you competed in these trials where the winner would win the rights to his final book in this, I think it's called like the Clock Island series, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. It was very good. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Like this is going to be an interesting way to kind of like wrap up these books, because here it is in December and I'm trying to remember my thoughts in depth from July after I've read so many books. But I think kind of removing myself a few months from the books, I'll be able to give you like my long-standing impressions of what I kind of thought about the book. And when I think back on this one, It got slow at parts, it kind of dragged on at parts, and it lost my interest at parts, but overall the writing was great. Meg Schaefer's writing kept me interested for the most part, and I think what really kept me invested in this book was the storyline. However, the relationship between our main female character and a child who was her student in this book got a little cringy, awkward, and like mildly inappropriate in my opinion. In this book, her motivation for winning the rights to the Clocktown book, or the Clock Island book, was so that she could adopt this little boy who was orphaned, who was in her classroom, like one of her students. And the way that she was basically telling him, like, this adoption was in the bag, like, you're essentially already my son, before she'd even gotten approval to adopt him, seemed a little bit emotionally manipulative or like psychologically manipulative to me. And I didn't love it. And for some reason, it really just cringed me out the entire book. But that might have been a me issue. I don't know. Comment below if you've read this book and you like disagreed or you agreed. If you know what I'm saying, like the relationship between the female character and the student. But overall, a really good book. I think looking back on it, definitely deserved the 3.5 stars. I then jumped into Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. This is the second book in the Magnolia Parks universe and the first book that centers on Daisy as our main female character, because obviously in the first book, which is Magnolia Parks, we focus on Magnolia. I gave this a 4.5 stars, and I have to be completely honest with you. As someone who is a diehard Gossip Girl show lover, if you love the show Gossip Girl and you want it to be basically like rich person drama but set in London, you are going to love the Magnolia Parks universe. This is just rich people toxicity, like British dry humor. It is kind of all drama, no plot, but in the best possible way. And I love this series. Then I went straight into Belladonna and I gave this 3 stars. I've got to be honest with you guys, this wasn't my absolute favorite. I loved the gothic vibes of this plot and this atmosphere and this writing. So that isn't where it fell flat for me. For me, the general like tying up of plot points in the storyline had a lot of holes. I didn't like the way that a lot of them just were kind of like introduced but then never explained, or introduced but then never delved into. With that being said, this is a trilogy and I have not read Foxglove, which is the second in the series yet. So maybe some of those plot holes will be filled in Foxglove. But my point is, you shouldn't leave the first book unsatisfied with the promise or the kind of extortion of having to read the second book to become satisfied with the story. I also didn't love the love story in this book. Considering it's a YA fantasy romance, I feel like I should be a little bit more invested in the romance, and I'm just wasn't. So I'm definitely going to continue. 3 stars is not necessarily a bad rating. It just didn't blow my socks off. I kind of went into this maybe with my expectations a little high because it's so viral and popular on BookTube and BookTok and Bookstagram, and I didn't find myself as blown away by it. But overall, I'm going to continue. Maybe I will change my mind after Foxglove. I then jumped into our straight literary fiction with The Secret Book of Flora Lee by Patty Callahan Henry and gave this 4 stars. This was amazing. This was literary fiction, historical fiction, a little bit of like mystery thrown in there. It is so good. It's so interesting. This book is about a girl who used to tell a story to her little sister, this made up fictional, almost like a fairy tale, like a fable story that she had made up to drown out some fighting and bad circumstances in their childhood. And her sister, when she was 6 years old, goes missing, her little sister. Fast forward, I don't remember exactly how many years, but maybe even like 20 years into the future, I don't remember. But our main female character is now living and working in a bookstore. She's moved away from her town and she's working in this, it's kind of like a secondhand shop, almost like an antique shop for books. And a book is brought in on consignment, I believe. And it is a book that is the almost exact story that she used to tell to her little sister Flora. So the question becomes, is Flora alive and she published this book? Or is Flora alive and she recounted this story to somebody else who then went on to publish it? Or even more sinister, if Flora isn't alive, someone spoke to Flora to get this story before she went missing, because the only 2 people that should know this story are Flora and our main female character. The writing was amazing. I loved the historical elements. I cannot wait to read more by this author, and it definitely deserves the 4 stars. I then picked up Book Lovers by Emily Henry and gave this 4.5 stars, I believe. 4.5 stars. I need to stop second guessing myself. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This book could, looking back on it, have been a 5-star book. However, a couple of months before that, I had read Beach Read, which I gave 5 stars. It has become like a benchmark book for me. One of my favorite books I've read in the last few years. And I think when I, perhaps unfairly, like compared, quote unquote, or put this next to, juxtaposed this to Beach Read, it just didn't hit quite as hard. It was just slightly less impressive, I guess, or I came away from the book not quite having the same 5-star feeling. That's a good way to say it, that I have when I came out of Beach Read. But this was absolutely fantastic. Emily Henry can write the hell out of a book, let me tell you. Her writing is beautiful, but it's not condescending or pretentious. It's easy to understand, and she develops her characters so well. If you haven't read this, it's about our main female character who takes her little sister on a vacation to this town that was from a book series that she had edited. And long story short, her workplace rival shows up in the town and it progresses from there. It is so beautifully written. It is so great. If you were to pick up either Book Lovers or Beach Read by Emily Henry, you will not be disappointed. When I read this, I think I said several times, like after Beach Read and then with Book Lovers, I get the Emily Henry hype. I then picked up One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and I gave this a 4.5 stars as well. This book, to this day, stands out for me as one of the most interesting magic systems I've ever read. And similar to what I said about Belladonna, where this is a gothic written fantasy, like a gothic themed fantasy, I love that in my fantasies. And I'm kind of learning that. I'm taking that as a theme, that gothic in my fantasy just works for me. Something about the atmosphere kind of intermeshing with the fantasy elements just works. I love it. And this was done well. So was Belladonna, but this was done really well. Combine that with the interesting magic system and a love story that I actually could see and I believed, you get a 4.5 star book. Really great. Next up, I went into Glint by Raven Kennedy. This is the second book in the Plated Prisoner series. I am obsessed with this series. Obsessed. I gave this a 4.5 stars, but if the books continue the way they have been, this could be a 5-star series when I'm done. I really hope it does, because I look forward to Raven Kennedy's writing. If you haven't read the Plated Prisoner series, this is a King Midas retelling. So our main female character, Orin, is gold plated, essentially. She's gold touched. She's been held as a concubine, or they call it in the series a saddle, for King Midas, and she is more or less taken during a war of a political war in their kingdoms. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away too much, because I went into this series more or less blind, and that is the way to do this. But 4.5 stars, excellent. I have been putting off the third book, which is called Gleam, because it's significantly longer, but also I was so left flummoxed at the end of this book that I'm almost intimidated to know what's going to happen in Gleam. If you have not picked up Gild or Glint, highly suggest. And last but not least, in the month of July, I picked up It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I did this because I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie, which I still, in December, haven't watched. I'm going to. Just haven't gotten to it. I actually just saw that it uploaded. I think it's on Netflix right now, so maybe that will be an activity for tonight after the boys go to sleep. But I did pick up this book and I gave it 4 stars. I do not understand the hate that this book gets. And I've been seeing it from a lot of people that they say it glorifies DV and things like that. And I could not disagree more. I read this book and immediately took that this highlighted how brutal and how psychologically damaging it is to be in a violent circumstance like our main female character was. And I so appreciated that she wrote about the grit and the poor decision making and the trauma and all the things that happen, because that is real life. That is real. And if you have ever, if you, God forbid, have ever been in a situation like our main female character, I believe her name was Lily, I'm almost positive. If you've ever been in a situation like Lily has personally, I would, God, feel so horrible for you. But I think all of us have been in situations where we've known someone in our lives who is in some sort of situation that we worry about them, as far as in a romantic relationship. And and at least in my experience, they've all made similar decisions that Lily did, or they've all said similar phrases that Lily did while she was in the middle of this trauma. And we don't understand it at the time, but when you read about Lily going through it and you read it from inside Lily's head, I found it actually very clarifying, and I really liked this book. So I gave it 4 stars. So far for me, Colleen Hoover has not really disappointed me. And there you have it. That was our stack for July. I'm going to go grab all of our book for August. So one thing you will learn about me is that I go through like different obsessions, right? Like sometimes all I want to do is read a physical book and physically flip the pages. And other times I become obsessed with my Kindle. And apparently August was a month where I was slowly becoming obsessed with my Kindle, because although I read 9 books, these are the only ones that I could pull off my shelves. The rest of them were on my Kindle. So I read 5 books on my Kindle and 4 books physically. And when I'm looking at my stats, I read 3 romances, 4 romanticises, 1 literary fiction, and 1 mystery thriller. Okay, so I didn't start off on the highest note. I did read Teach Me the Ropes by Vanessa Vale on my Kindle, and I gave this 2 stars. This was an attempt at a cowboy romance. I remember it being relatively short. I'll put up here how many pages it was. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was relatively short, and I think maybe part of the mistake that I made was I did listen to it on audio, and I'm realizing that spicy romance is probably not going to be audiobook material for me, because listening to some of these smut scenes in my ears, like I can't do it. I really can't. It's like having someone read the scenes to you in a movie. It was so awkward for me, and I kept feeling like someone was going to hear me listening to this, even though I know that they wouldn't, but it was weird. And admittedly, it probably did take away from the experience for me, but I didn't find this particularly well written. It actually didn't make sense in parts of it, and I did not like the sexy banter between the characters. I didn't find it attractive at all. So 2 stars. Moving on. I then went into Catching Fire, which is the second book in the Hunger Games series, and I gave this 4 stars. I talk about it a ton in this video that I did, this challenge that I did, but I was a Harry Potter generation. By the time that the Hunger Games came around, I was kind of like, quote, too old. Like I didn't read it. It kind of missed me. So this is my first Hunger Game experience, and I am loving it. It was fantastic. Next up, I did pick up Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan, I believe is how you pronounce her name. I've seen it pronounced like 3 different ways, but who knows? I gave this a 3.5 star. I thought the writing was okay. It's a cute little short romance, which I did like. And I understand that you do have to kind of rush things when you don't have as many pages to develop the relationship. The problem that I had is that our main female character was a single, sort of single mother. Like she was going through a divorce. And this man comes to shoot essentially like a Hallmark movie at her house. And he's the main male character, just decides to like stay in character. He'll stay with her, but on literally day 3, he's like babysitting her small child. And as a mom, I just was like, no. So I understand that short romances need to be rushed, but this felt rushed in a really silly, unrealistic way. I then switched back onto my Kindle and picked up Red Queen and gave this 4 stars. This was a really good book. I am going to continue the series. It's basically about a kingdom who's ruled by different bloods. So if you have silver blood, you're an elite. If you have red blood, you're a commoner. And our main female character has been raised as a common red blood, but finds out that she may just be more elite than she thinks. The writing was great. It was fantastic. It had a little bit of like an epic vibe to it. I can sense that there is going to be a romance, but it's kind of like a romance subplot, and I did kind of like that. Next up, I read Middle of the Night by Riley Sager with the Thrills and Chills book club, and I gave this a 4 star, which is a big deal if you know my complicated relationship, not only with mystery thrillers, but particularly with Riley Sager, because I did read The House on the Lake before this one, and did not like that book at all. I thought the ending was just plain stupid. If you agree or disagree, comment below. I'm open to changing my mind, but to me, the ending was just plain ridiculously stupid. So when they decided to read Middle of the Night for the month that I was co-hosting the book club with them, I was kind of just like, oh, okay, like, I'll give him another try, and I'm so happy I did because Middle of the Night was excellent. This book is about our main male character who, when he was like around 8 years old, he camps in his backyard with his best friend and neighbor that like they play in the neighborhood. And when he wakes up in the morning, his friend is gone and there's a slice missing out of the tent, and the story progresses from there. It was really good. I also read the book club pick for the Homie and Homely Book Club, and we chose Lightlark by Alex Astor. I gave this a 3.5 stars, and I did really enjoy it. I'm very excited to continue on. I thought for her debut novel, this was an excellent effort. This is about an island that pops up every 100 years, and the rest of the kingdoms have to gather on this island, essentially to like fight to try to break a curse that's been going through their world. It's very good. I don't remember a ton of the details at this point, but I do just remember thinking it was a bit long, and I thought some of the writing was childish at times, but once again, this was a debut, and as she finds her footing and as she kind of hammers down her style, I could see that improving and not being a problem for me anymore. So I do have Nightbane, which is the second book in the series, and I'm excited to pick it up. Next up, I picked up Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus, and I gave this 3 stars, but honestly, I probably could go down if I'm like thinking back on it. I think I gave it 3 stars, and I think I talked about this like at length in the video that I watched it in. The writing in this book, out of this world amazing. Bonnie Garmus can obviously write. Bonnie Garmus is obviously a very talented woman, and she's a talented author. The writing is what saved this book. However, the main female character is insufferable, and in fairness, I talk about this a ton in this video, this book was not for me. I am not the intended audience for this book, and I am not the demographic for this book. I don't have the beliefs that line up with this book, so I didn't personally connect to any of the characters, and I actually found them, especially the female character in this book, pretty insufferable, pretty agitating, and pretty miserable. So 3 stars, but the writing's great, and if you read the synopsis and it sounds like it's up your alley, then I'm sure you'll give it a much higher rating than I did. There is a peg for every hole, and unfortunately this was just not for me, but I hope it's for all of you. I then picked up the book that I had been avoiding the hardest, Iron Flame by Miss Rebecca Yarros. If you've stuck around on this channel at all, you know that Fourth Wing was my favorite book of 2023. I gave it 6 stars, infinity stars. And for some reason, because I loved it so much and because I saw kind of like the knee-jerk initial reaction, the negative reaction to Iron Flame when it first came out all over BookTube and Bookstagram, I was so intimidated that this was going to ruin Fourth Wing for me. But I don't know what everybody was talking about, because I gave this a 4.5 stars and it was fantastic. And when Onyx Storm comes out on January 25th, everything ends. Everything finishes, and I read that book, because the way that this ended, I don't know how Rebecca Yarros is doing that to us. Last but not least, for August, I picked up Out on a Limb and gave this 4 stars. This was really great. I really liked that there were different main characters, and I loved that the representation in this book, the main male character, I believe, had a limb difference in his leg, and I believe the main female character had an arm limb difference. If I'm mixing those up, I apologize. It's been a bit, but I know they both connected and were identifying in each other based on their limb differences. And I found that so heartwarming, because the conversations that they would have with each other was a way that they connected that most of us wouldn't understand. My battery's gonna die. Hold on. I have returned. And what I was saying before my battery decided to sabotage me, like it so often does, was that I found the way that they connected in their similarities so heartwarming, because the conversations that they were having were conversations that only the two of them would fully understand. And I really just felt their connection deepen because of that. I loved this book. It was excellent, and I gave it 4 stars. And just like that, those were our reads for August, plus our Kindle books, which, you know, the stack should be up here. This is so much less satisfying than the way the stack should be, because it was a great reading month. But on to September. Moving on to August, and here is our stack, give or take 1 or 2 books. Okay, unfortunately we didn't start August off with the highest note, because I picked up A Fragile Enchantment by Alison Saft, and I gave this 2.5 stars. Now that's not horrible, that is exactly perfectly average, and that's kind of what I came out of this book thinking it was. It was completely perfectly average. It was fine, the writing was fine, the characters were fine, but they were unengaging, the storyline was relatively boring, and I'm telling you right now, nothing happens. Our main female character works in a long line of seamstresses and tailors, and she is invited to the palace to make the wedding garbs for the prince, who is our main male character. And in this book, she can sew magic into her garments to evoke a feeling in others. And that was what was so kind of disappointing about this book, because the concept is so cool. You could have done so much with this book. You could have made it so interesting. You could have gone in so many different ways. And unfortunately, Allison Saft goes in none of those ways, and nothing really happens. And the characters were unengaging. I didn't really care for any of them. And I actually thought that their dialogue was pretty bad. So 2.5 stars. It was decent. If you like a little bit cozier, a little bit slower, then this may be for you. But unfortunately, something just didn't work for me. Luckily, after that semi-disappointment, I picked up Hello Stranger by Katherine Center, and I gave this a 4 stars. Katherine Center is slowly becoming an auto-buy author for me because her books are just so well done. And I am a spice-loving reader. I do love me some good spicy scenes. Katherine Center does closed-door romance, and at first I thought that maybe she wouldn't be for me because for me, spice does add to the romance. However, it is a testament to Katherine Center's writing that I can go into her books and she doesn't need the spice to bolster up the romance, if that makes any sense. Her romance stands on its own, and it is so, so good. This book follows our main female character, who's a portrait artist, gets into an accident and loses the ability to recognize faces. I forget what the condition is called, but there is a fantastic note at the end of the book that gives you some information about it. It says, a note about prosopagnosia. Is that how you pronounce this? Prosopagnosia? Something like that. And that is, there are 2 different types of face blindness, or prosopagnosia. The type that Sadie has in this story is called acquired, meaning that it happened through some sort of life event accident as opposed to being born with it, which is the other kind. It was fascinating to read about. It's such a good book. The romance is really cute, and I liked all our characters. And on top of that, the cherry on the sundae is Katherine Center's fantastic writing. So thank God for Hello Stranger pulling me out of my little potential starting of a slump with Fragile Enchantment, because this was a 4 star. I then picked up Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This was the first month that my girlies and I started our Laini Taylor read along. We are reading, well, I'm saying 1 book every month. This particular month we did read 2. We'll get to that in a second. This is the first book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. We have since moved on and we have finished the trilogy, which is so crazy. I gave this a 4 star and I really loved it. I'm not going to tell you too much about this book because not only did I discuss it in several videos, but we also did a whole live where we went on and even gave spoilers. So if you're going to read this and you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch our live. But 4 stars. I'm so excited to continue on in our Laini Taylor journey. Like I said, we read 2 books for our Laini Taylor read-along. We then went into Night of Cake and Puppets, which is a little like graphic novella that follows Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and I loved this. I think if possible, I might have even liked this a little bit more than the actual book. I gave this 4 stars as well. Please don't skip it. If you're going to read the trilogy, technically this is like extra information, but it's so good. And the graphic novel element of it was amazing. So definitely worth the read. I then picked up Gilded by Marissa Myers, and I gave this a 3.5 star. This is kind of where I started solidifying the notion that fairy tale retellings might just not be for me. However, I did read Heartless by Marissa Meyer and I really enjoyed it. So she has a whole like fairy tale retelling thing that she does, and I know that she is the queen of it. If you're going to get into it, I would probably suggest Marissa Meyer because her writing's amazing, but I just think they bore me. The problem with fairy tale retellings for me is that you already know the story. You go into this book and I already know what's going to happen. If you've seen the fairy tale, like, you know. More or less what this book is about, it's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, so everything that happens in Rumpelstiltskin happens in this. They spin gold, there's a girl in a tower. It is very good. If you like fairy tale retellings, I definitely would recommend this, but not my thing and not my favorite book. So After Gilded, I started falling into a little bit of a book slump. And for me, the only thing that pulls me out of a book slump is mood reading, and typically, specifically mood reading, super spicy romantasy and romance. I don't know why, but it keeps my attention. So I then picked up Ensnared by Rebecca Quinn. This is a super spicy, dark romance about a girl who is living in a cave after a war has happened. It's basically like almost dystopian. And one day she is out in the woods. I think I remember her like hunter-gatherer or something like that, and these men try to kidnap her, and she runs through the woods and then comes to this other commune of men who take her in and protect her. It is a reverse harem. It is spice, 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 but it's very good. I gave this a 4-star. And there you have our stack for September. Let me go and pull the books for October. So starting in the month of October, I was really feeling the effects of my book slump. And like I said, I was trying to gravitate towards slightly smuttier reads because those are what get me out of my slump. So in the month of October, I read 4 books. Let's talk about them. So right when I got done telling you guys that I realized fairy tale retellings might just not be my jam, imagine my surprise when I picked up Hooked by Emily McIntyre and gave this a 4-star. I loved this. Now, here is how I will justify this and not look like a total hypocrite. Emily McIntyre herself says this is not a fairy tale retelling. This is a fractured fairy tale reimagining. So as the name implies, this does tell the story of Hook, Captain Hook from Peter Pan. He is James Hook, our main male character in this book, and he is a bad guy. He's kind of like a mafia mob guy, and the entire theme of the Never After series is that you are being told from the villain's perspective, where like the villain gets the girl or the villain gets the guy. So you're kind of reimagining and taking it and flipping it on its head, where you're kind of rooting for the villain. And that, I think, was enough of a difference from the original story that it just kind of sucked me in. Add in the spice and the really solid writing, and this was 4 stars all day long. This is a book that I'm so excited to continue on with the series, and I am chomping at the bit to go into the second book, which is Scarred. Yeah, like the Lion King. Continuing with our spicy series, I picked up The Home Run Proposal by Maren Moore and gave this 4 stars as well. There's not much to say about this book. This is a college-age baseball spicy smutty romance. And then I grabbed the book that not only is going to go on the roster as the book that probably surprised me the most with how much I loved it, but is probably going to go into my top maybe 3, but definitely top 5 books of 2024, and that was Gothicana by Runix. I gave this a 4.5 star, and I ate up every single word of this book. This book was so good. Now, this is teacher student. It's not going to be for everybody, but the spice was so well done. The college atmosphere and like the way, the description of the dark academia was so good. Everything about this book sucked me in. I'm purposely not going to tell you anything else about this book. I discussed it more in the video that I did, but like, go into it blind, I'm begging of you, but just know this is dark academia, college on a hill with a hot, sexy teacher. I did also read the Homie and Homely Book Club's book pick for October, and that was Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Marer, and I gave this a 3.5 star. I really, really liked this. This was cozy, definitely not smutty yet. I don't know if it gets smuttier. I'm hoping it kind of does, because I need a little bit more romance, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I needed to umph itself up a little bit, but this was cozy. This was cute. The banter was hysterical in this book. These main characters chat and joke and laugh and make fun of each other, and it's kind of like my love language. Like, we have this joke in my family that if I'm not making fun of you, I don't love you. So it was just, it spoke to my little pot stirrer heart. You know what I'm saying? It was so good. 3.5 stars. I might be convinced to go up to 3.75, maybe even a 4. No, not a 4. I might be convinced to go up to a 3.75, but not a 4. If that doesn't tell you right there that I was in a slump, that we're already done with the month of October. But the good news is these books got me out of the slump. So let's talk about November. So November was a month where I almost exclusively read on my Kindle. There's only 2 physical books that I currently still have to talk about, so I'm not even going to bother holding up a stack, but it was a great reading month. And a couple of them, you could probably make the argument that I could have probably put them in last month's, because it was one of those situations where I started the book in the last couple of days of the month and technically didn't finish until like the 1st or the 2nd of the month. So like the bulk of it was read in October, but I technically didn't mark them read until the beginning of November. So on Goodreads, it makes it look like November was a lot more, but some of these I could make the argument that they were read in October. It doesn't matter. Why am I telling you this? Let's talk about the books. So the first book that I read was A Fate of Wrath and Flame by K.A. Tucker, and I gave this a 3.5 stars. This book I was so conflicted on this because the writing is so good, and I am going to continue on. However, you could have easily cut 200 pages out of this book, and I'm not being hyperbolic at all. This book was so unnecessarily wordy and long, and it contributed nothing to the world, nothing to the characters, and nothing to the story. It was just like words for words' sake, to the point where I could skim full chapters and I wouldn't have missed anything. So I think K.A. Tucker could have gone back and edited this book down 200 pages, and it would have been so much better of a reading experience. But like I said, I did end up still giving it 3.5 stars because the characters were great, the story was great, and I get the idea of what she's doing. I'm excited to see where she takes it. However, I will tell you, if the second book is as needlessly wordy, I don't know that I'll continue. Next up, I picked up Phantasma, which was the Homie and Homely book club for November, and I ended up giving this a 4-star. This book has made the rounds on BookTube, so I'm not going to give you a synopsis, but dark, gothic, deadly trials, romantasy, so good, really unique. The writing is a little YA at parts, but very adult at other parts, so I think it had a little bit of trouble finding its footing, but I'm going to continue, and I really enjoyed it. I also read both The Scepter and The Sword, which are the 2 prequel novellas before A Crown of Oaths and Curses by J. Bree. I gave The Scepter 3.75 and I gave The Sword 4 stars. They're very similar. So basically what this is I haven't read A Crowns of Oaths and Curses yet, but I'm assuming that The Scepter is the prequel and background information on who I'm assuming is going to be our main female character in Oaths and Curses. And The Sword, I'm assuming, is going to be the main male character. So you're just getting a little bit of prequel, pre-information before you read the actual long book. I will say this, to give these high star ratings to novellas is very unlike me. So I really enjoyed J. Bree's writing, and I like the direction that the novellas are leading you. So if the writing and the storyline continues into Oaths and Curses, I could see this becoming a really favorite book of mine. I also read Deadly Occupants by Mads Rafferty, and I gave this a 2.75 stars. Once again, want to remind you that a 2.5 is perfectly average, and this was just slightly above fine to me. I think that this suffered a little bit from YA mystery thriller, where that's kind of not going to be aimed at me. It's not meant for me. I think I'm just kind of a little bit old for this book. It was, in my opinion, I'm so sorry, it was just not well written. It wasn't well written. I mean, it wasn't really that mysterious or thrilling. It was very predictable. The banter and the dialogue was very, I feel so mean. This is so mean. It was very young and silly, and I didn't love it. I'm so sorry. I didn't love this book, but 2.75 is average. Mads does have a fantasy romantasy series that I am willing to try, but I think this might just be a book that I'm, too old for. This isn't intended for me, and I understand that, but this unfortunately just didn't really hit the way I wanted it to. I also picked up Days in Blood and Starlight, which is the second book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. This was the book of the month that we were reading for our Laini Taylor's Complete Works read-along, and I gave this, I think, a 3.5 stars. This series is very, very good. However, so far, the first book far outshined what I've read so far. I might as well go ahead and talk about this. So since we're talking about this, we might as well also talk, this isn't in sequential order, but I also did go ahead and read the third book, which is Dreams of Gods and Monsters. I read Days of Blood and Starlight, the second book at the beginning of the month, and I read this one at the end of the month because it is the third book, and I gave this a 2.75 stars as well. The scary part about this series was I fear that the first book and the graphic novel were kind of like the pinnacle, and they kind of just slowly went down from there. To me, this book series easily could have been a duology, if not maybe even a standalone, just like a longer standalone. I did not care for these as much. However, I'm excited to see where Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares, I think, are the next two books we're going into. I do like Laini Taylor's writing, and these were YA. I think her next duology gets a little bit more adult, and maybe that was what wasn't working for me, because like I've said several times, YA, I think I'm just a little too old for. So that could have been the problem. Okay, the last book I did read physically, but unfortunately I unhauled it, and that should tell you all that you need to know. I did read Gideon the Ninth with Drew from Drew's Ambitious Reads, and I gave it a 2-star. And honestly, one of those stars was just for how incredibly creative the plot line could have been. I actively disliked this book. It was not for me, and I immediately closed it, grabbed Hero and Nona, which are the second and the third books, and brought them to my little free library and donated them, because I will not be reading them. I will not be continuing on the series, and I just really disliked this book. I was so confused for so much of it, and the other part of it, like, I understand that sci-fi isn't really my thing, so it could have been that, but I have read some sci-fi that I've really enjoyed. I read Project Hail Mary, and I really liked it. This was confusing, and I didn't care enough about the story to delve into it to work on not being confused, and I just really didn't like it. It was not for me, and I actually found our main female character supremely annoying. I didn't like it. The dialogue in this book is a train wreck. A train wreck. I can't say most of what the dialogue was, but if you've read it and feel the same way, it was bad, 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 bad. It was slang, but supposed to be on another planet, and it was bad, cringy slang, and this book was just not it, guys. This was really bad, and I immediately unhauled it. That should tell you everything. It didn't even go on my friends and family shelf because I just wouldn't do that to my friends and family. I really did not like it. So 2 stars. I'm so sad that we're ending it on a bad note, but gotta be honest with you guys. And that was it, guys. That was the 35 books I've read since the beginning of July. Once again, I'm sorry it took so long to make this, but I'm so happy that I finally had a chance to sit down and give you guys what you all have been asking for. So if you made it this long, comment the sunflower emoji, because it is cold and gloomy here in Connecticut and I need a little bit of sunshine in my life. And then do all the things that you guys are the best and so professional at doing. Like, comment, subscribe. Comment below and tell me that it shouldn't be another 5 or 6 months until I do another one of these. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.